So I'm quite excited about today's topic. I'm sure, for our students, it's going to be a great, great thing. Because in India, we have very, very different perceptions when it comes to music and art. So it would be amazing to talk to you guys, learn more, and see
Great. Yeah.
how things are.
Yeah, I don't want to assume what your students think about music and the arts. So it'll be interesting to get a sense of that through the questions that they ask.
Yeah.
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 So both of you have basically music degrees, right?
No, I'm an art historian.
Arts. Oh, you're a historian, right?
Yeah, and music historian, basically. But
Oh, wow.
recent, like 20th century music. Feels recent to me, historical to your students.
So did you always want to be in this line of, careers? Have you ever thought of changing? Sorry.
I think I probably did always want to. Yeah. I think as I guess I was about to say, as most people who are like me, but I'm not sure that's quite true. But most people who study art history, I think, thought about the idea of being an artist when they were a child. And I did fine art for quite some time, and then realised that wasn't right when I was about 16 or something. So, but I can't remember not wanting to. I mean, you don't know what a curator is at that point, really. But I don't remember not really wanting. I don't remember thinking, there's this whole other thing that I'm interested in, really. I think it was always that for me, to some extent or another.
That's interesting. What about you, Roddy?
A very similar story.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and you have these starry ideas about being an artist or a composer, in my case. Then you get to university, you're no longer a big fish in a small pond, and
exactly
you realize, wow, okay, there's enough composers already. But what we don't have are enough interesting conversations about what they're all doing and what they think they're doing. So I got into criticism, and people kept giving me funding to do this for some reason. So it kind of snowballed from there, but there was no grand plan to be an academic. I didn't know what an academic was when I was 16.
No, exactly. That's the thing.
Yeah.
I think
that's the thing. You have a very narrow view of what those jobs could be. And actually there's hundreds of different things that go into the museum sector that I work in and the industry more generally. You need all sorts of people with all sorts of different perspectives and voices. So, at some point that kind of that thing of you can be an artist or a kind of disrupts and splinters, and you realize there's many people that kind of create that structure.
So I think Sarah is taking a little bit, maybe some issues with the net. I think we formally start this session. My name is Kalpana Zuchi. I'm part of the international relations team at TC Global. And today we have an amazing topic that we are going to have a discussion about. And students and parents, please feel free to write into the chat box asking all your questions. What we're going to discuss today is finding your niche about music and art. So we have with us Professor Roddy. I would just want you to introduce yourself, Roddy.
Sure. Thank you, Kapana. That's a very warm introduction. And I'm delighted to be here and to speak with you and speak with you and definitely not to you. So we're really interested to get your perspectives on the arts and what that might mean for you all. So my background is that I'm a lecturer in music at the University of Manchester. And in my research and teaching, I've specialised on recent history. As well as being a researcher and a lecturer and a teacher, I'm also admissions tutor for the music department. So I'm in charge of home and overseas recruitment to the music department. And I also serve as a committee member for the UK's association body for music in the higher education sector called Music HE. So I'm sort of in on all of those conversations about how music presents itself to the UK government and other stakeholders and those kinds of things.
Thank you, Professor Roddy. Rebecca, over to you. Please introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for that. And I just want to echo Roddy's thoughts that, we definitely want to hear from you and speak with you and understand more about your perspectives. I'm Rebecca Newell. I'm head of art at Imperial War Museums, or IWM. We are a museum organisation that has 5 branches across the UK. My predominant role is that I'm responsible for all aspects of the care, display and interpretation of the museum's preeminent art collection, which spans 1914 to the present day. So a huge collection of about 100,000 things, all told, and thematically covers war and conflict for that last century history. So I'm the kind of lead curator for art and art history at the museum. I also work on projects with artists, making kind of projects and opportunities available with and for artists. And I'm recently just launched a fund that will make 2 million available to artists over the next sort of 2 to 3 years, working with the museum to kind of work on commissioning projects and launch those commissions throughout the country. So I would say that partnership working and kind of collaboration with other smaller organisations across my sector is the other thing that's emerging as a massive part of my job. I have a background in art and art history, so that's where I come from towards this space. But obviously now I apply that thinking to a kind of social history context. So that's me.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that, Rebecca. Sarah, over to you.
Thank you, and hello everyone. Thank you for inviting me to be part of this very impressive panel. Apologies if you can hear a dog barking in the background, but those are the hazards of these sessions. Anyway, yes, my name is Sarah Charles. I actually work at the Arts University Bournemouth, which is a specialist art, design, media and performance university. So that's what we do. We're pretty good at it. We've been doing it quite a long time, about 130 years. So I enjoy a bit of a hybrid role. I now work as a senior international officer, which means I get to do amazing travel all over the world. I'm very, very lucky, very fortunate. And so I love doing that. But my background is in fashion. I trained as an undergraduate in the fashion industry. I worked in the fashion industry for some big brands and some independents. Went into education in about the 2000s, became course leader of the fashion program at Arts University, then decided to take a slightly different route with my postgraduate study and went into international education. And that's how I ended up with this hybrid role that I'm mentioning, which sort of spans education and international. So I'm in a great place, great position, love what I do, and really excited, as Roddy mentioned, to hear about different perspectives, different models, different attitudes, different approaches, and also the future. I mean, it was lovely what Rebecca said about that funding that's becoming available. The talk at the moment on the investment that needs to happen in creativity is so hot that it's a very exciting future. There we are, done.
Fantastic.
We can talk forever.
That really lays the foundation for our discussion. So basically, our students, when they are looking at options in the subject area of art and music, Sarah, would you like to throw a little more light? What all options do they have? What kind of opportunities do they have?
Okay, yeah, endless is the answer to that one. I mean, you have to start somewhere. So I suppose at school, we have an innate desire in all of us to draw, to create, to be creative, since we were tiny children. That's what we've sort of wanted to do, but it kind of gets knocked out of us somewhere along the line, sometimes in school. Roddy's, smiling, he can appreciate that. But what you need to do is, I suppose, either hang on to it as much as you can, or have teachers who encourage you to bring that out in you as part of your overall studies, because it's all important. I mean, we're making choices as we go through life. But then when you get to that point, perhaps sort of 15, 16, 17, I think that's when you need to perhaps listen to your I was talking to a student the other day. Listen to your heart sometimes rather than your head, and don't be too influenced by what people are telling you, and think about what it is that really makes you happy, really has that passion part to it. And then go with that. Trust your instincts,
Sure.
and they will take you to the next stage. Roddy.
Sure, Roddy.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, Sarah's put that so beautifully. I think it's about this notion of discovery. When you're attuned to the world, I can't imagine what my life would be like if I hadn't done music, because the way that I see the world, the way that I engage with people, the way that I listen to the world around me is absolutely shaped by my education and experiences through music and related arts. So it goes right to the heart of how you engage with the world as an individual. And that's going to change and develop, obviously, over time, and you go through different stages. So what I thought being a musician was at 16 is very different to what I think being musical means now that I'm, a number of years beyond 16. So it's this idea of discovery and emergence, and having the courage to really follow your own instincts at that point, and having good teachers around you, and then getting as much advice as you can about what the options are. I don't think I actually knew that much about what the options were when I was 16, 17. It was either go to music college, conservatoire for a very formal training, or do a music degree at a university for a more well-rounded academic experience. But that's a bit of a false binary these days, because what's going on in places like music colleges is a lot of high quality research. And what's going on in university departments is a lot of high quality practice-based stuff. So that old-fashioned distinction between a technical training or an academic training, certainly in music, no longer really holds true. So there's so many different types of music degree that you can do, and your experience will be fundamentally shaped by the type of department or institution that you go to, who teaches you, what kind of teaching philosophy they have, what kinds of engagement you get outside of the course with external partners and that kind of thing. So the good thing about the world we live in today is there's loads more information available online in videos and so on about how each educational establishment presents itself, and will create an environment in which you learn. When I was going to university, you get a UCAS prospectus with a page for each institution, and that was it, really.
So, true. Yeah. Rebecca, would you like to add something?
I just want to echo everything that's been said. I think that it's very difficult to know what the opportunities might be when you're working through those questions and thinking about those bits of advice that you get from your education specialists around you. It's really difficult to know what it might be like out there in the world. And I think what's really interesting about, we were talking before, and in terms of what Sarah just said, the three of us, I think, started with the making of the thing. I did fine art. Roddy, had that kind of experience of playing or writing about it, and didn't really feel that there was a massive grey area. And I think the same was for me. I think I started with painting and drawing, and I still do that. I've always loved that since I was very small. But at some point realized that wasn't the thing that really made my heart sing. The thing that made my heart sing was talking about things that I saw in museums and other people's work, and finding modes of criticism and kind of thinking about how they made it and why. And I think that, once you start to if you try and keep your mind open to those other sorts of things that don't make you feel disappointed that you're not the best in your class at that thing, but you might be the best in your class at this other thing. And I think that sort of feeling can be really empowering. And it's about, those networks around you, formal ones and other ones that enable you to kind of grow that picture, because actually the kind of creative industries is a vast machine with many parts, and we need specialists of all kind to make it run. So I think it, as long as you kind of pursuing your niche activity, kind of keep that going as that creative engine, and actually also think about you know, actually, what am I really good at? What really, really makes me happy in this? And it might not be the thing you think it is. So yes, that was what I say.
Sure. On that note, you know what happens to most of our students is when they're choosing a stream, a study area, the thing that comes to their mind is every country across the globe is giving a lot of priority to STEM courses. So how do they kind of now get that STEAM? We were discussing the other day with Professor Roddy. How do we kind of encourage them to look at the art side of things? What would you suggest? What are the opportunities in this area? We start with you, Professor Roddy.
Okay, so I mean, the first thing we need to do is explode this notion of what the arts is and what it can be. And so the critic in me wants to take this word niche and sort of pull it apart, really, and even perhaps put it in the bin. Because what it suggests is that you're going down a very narrow path, and or that you're going into something so that you can express yourself. We get a lot of students who come because they think an art career and being an artist. And when you get to university stage, you realize a couple of things. First of all, that the arts are inherently linked to every other aspect of our lived experience, including all aspects of STEM. And particularly if you progress into the field of research, you realize that scientists wouldn't be able to do what they're doing without the imagination and creativity which people traditionally associate with the arts.
Fantastic, right?
So that's the first thing. And the second thing is that the kind of practical upshot is that in terms of how we work with one another, we can't solve the problems that the world faces today by each of us working in our own specialist areas. It's all about this notion of interdisciplinary work, and it's become a bit of a buzzword, and that's the problem with buzzwords, they start to lose their meaning. But interdisciplinarity is so important. So if you look at the kinds of scholarly research that people are doing within music, it's working alongside, for example, neuroscientists, or it might be working alongside a curator to think about how we can sound out the past as well as display it through visual documents and artifacts. So the arts are completely interconnected, including into STEM. So I know it's a bit of a kind of 360 view of things and not a practical answer, but that's how I approach the relationship between the arts and the other aspects that you mentioned.
I think it's really interesting because it's actually a return to a more historical perspective, which I think, but actually it was only within the last sort of few hundred years that we separated arts out of a kind of STEM conversation, and we thought about them as humanities over here and science over here. And actually, when we talk about some of those kind of Renaissance artists, for example, they were very interested in optical illusion and all of those sort of scientific concepts, which were at the basis of every kind of pursuit. And I think that it's a pretty artificial thing that we've done to separate them at all. And I think for most of human history we didn't. And I think that there is this kind of dialogue, I suppose, about the importance of STEM and encouraging inclusion and equity in STEM in a way that the arts doesn't get kind of talked about in those ways. But actually all of the important conversations that apply to that STEM conversation also apply to an arts conversation about equity and access and disruption and kind of decolonization and all those sorts of things, which I think are absolutely at the core of what the arts sector more generally is trying to do. And in fact, let's remember as well, if we're going to be completely kind of distilled about it, the arts, is a huge part of the economic activity of the kind of global economy, let alone the UK. And I think that, that's sometimes forgotten. Actually, there's a huge amount of, it's a huge powerhouse. And we don't like to talk about it very much in the arts because that's not really what we want to do with our lives. But I think that is absolutely fundamental to remember when the conversation becomes a bit binary.
Sure, please.
Can I just jump in?
Please jump.
With a few statistics on that point. So just to speak about music, not the wider creative economy, which obviously encompasses so many different areas. The UK music industry contributed £5.8 billion to the UK economy in 2019 before the pandemic struck. Employment in the industry was at an all-time high in 2019, nearly 200,000 people. And the total export revenue of the music industry from the UK was 2.9 billion. And you can find similar stories all across the world. There are problems and issues around some of where this money is going. So a lot of the uptick in profit during the pandemic went straight into the pockets of streaming companies and music publishers and so on, while artists were still finding it quite hard to get things done. But there's money to be made within the creative economy. It's an enormous contributor to the UK government in our case, but to governments all across the world. And as Rebecca said, we don't often like to talk about that because it's exactly not the reason I got into doing music.
I think we need to talk about it more. We need to highlight these things more. That's why this discussion is happening, because students are not aware of these kinds of things. And it's great to hear from you guys how the world is. Yeah, please, Sarah, go on.
Sorry, I didn't want to. I was only thinking, as Roddy was speaking, that creative arts just has such a bad reputation. It was interesting what Rebecca said about the last couple of 100 years. I mean, I do a talk and I start by saying, most parents will be thinking of artists as sort of starving in drafty studios in the top of a rickety old building, with their paintbrushes. I mean, it's just so not true. And what Roddy was saying about the income and the global income and generation from creative arts is huge. And there are government bodies that are predicting that creative arts in general will be one of the biggest kind of catalysts for post-pandemic recovery across the world. I mean, they are this is not just us saying it, they are saying it. And the other thing, just quickly, is what is lovely for me to see, because I'm directly in touch with as a sort of recruitment person, students are driving this too. So the students are saying, hang on, so where is this going to take me? And Roddy, you were saying about the interdisciplinary. I get so many questions about, so how does that link with? And where can that take me? So students are driving this, along with us, because we're seeing actually things are changing, but also the new students coming in are driving it. So, it's a kind of pincer movement.
Yeah.
And,
I think, no, sorry, Sarah, go on.
No, carry on. I'm done.
It just made me think that, certainly in my part of the industry, there's increasing scrutiny as well on how people are paid, what they're paid, if and when they're exploited, and there's more whistleblowing than there's probably ever been on big institutions and what they pay. And I'm always conscious about that in terms of working with artists at all levels, whether it's I'm asking them to do one thing or I'm asking them to work with them for a year. I think very carefully about that. And actually, Sarah, Roddy, tell me if you disagree, but I think there's more scrutiny than there's ever been on that, despite the fact that we're in this quite difficult post-pandemic, early post-pandemic context. I think the lens is very firmly on, it doesn't mean we can, exploit people for free. It doesn't mean we can, I think that conversation within the kind of cultural dialogue that's going on at the moment about representation and access to opportunities is kind of sharper than ever, probably. And so that's reassuring. That's good. That kind of scrutiny is what we've needed for a while, I think. I think that applies to possibly visual arts more than anyone, but I know my brother's a musician and I know that's very present in that conversation as well.
Great. So do you think the pandemic has really impacted the creative industry, and has social media played a very important role in that? Rebecca, we start with you. Yeah.
I think I was reflecting on this earlier, and I think the pandemic, it's a very challenging economic context for museums and for people in jobs like mine. I think let's park that idea for a moment. I think that the kind of challenge and opportunity is actually slightly different in my mind. I think the challenge is, how do we preserve and create integrity about the visual arts experience for audiences that come to the museum? That's sort of one of my primary goals, of course. How do I bring visitors in? How do I get audiences to engage with the thing in the space? And to what extent the pandemic has impacted on that kind of real life visit. That's the challenge, I guess. And the opportunity is maybe that doesn't matter. And the kind of the focus on the digital, the focus on, this kind of event and all of that sort of sharing that we've been able to do over the course of the pandemic, and we've been able to learn and keep with us, is incredibly important and empowering. So, how do I embrace the kind of potential global audiences that we now have for collections, and how do we engage those audiences in our shared history in a way that feels authentic and meaningful? And that's a kind of endless opportunity. That's huge, isn't it? And I guess we're still working out what that means. But for me, it's been fascinating to kind of share content digitally in a way that I did do before, but I didn't prioritize before, I guess. And steering the path between those two things is the challenge ultimately. And I think the other side of that coin is that so many people have been in dialogue with us, giving feedback, sharing in those dialogues, creating storytelling, and that's a really important kind of disruption, but a really good disruption to the way that we used to do things that was more didactic potentially, and creating new. Actually, what it ends up being is, let's redefine what a museum is. Maybe a museum isn't what we think it is, and that's exciting.
Sure. Professor Roddy, you wanted to,
The parallels in music are striking, as they are just in teaching. So when we, at a drop of a hat, all started teaching online, it's been a massive disruption. But disruption is creative, and the challenge is exactly as Rebecca articulated it, really. So on Thursday, a bit of a plug for my department, we have a resident string quartet, and in the world of classical music, the live concert is the center of what it's all about.
Right.
And so we had them back in the hall on Thursday for the first time in 20 months because they're based in Paris. And it made you realize that there are some things that you can't get by just participating in a concert via an online stream. There is something about being up close in the room, in the moment, that you can't take away because it is unique. And so it is about expanding and how we, as Rebecca articulated so nicely, how we sort of find the middle way and balance those two things out, because they are different things, and they're going to inform and change one another a little bit. And it was really exciting to think how that might happen, because as a result of the pandemic, all our regular lunchtime weekly concerts put on our YouTube channel, and suddenly we have people from all over the world engaging with the department who never even knew what the University of Manchester Music Department was. So there's some fantastic opportunities there, and our students and musicians more broadly, being the enterprising kind of people that they are, just suddenly start thinking, well, social distancing, how do we compose a piece where social distancing is composed in? And so this is a wonderful piece, I'll put a link up to it if I can find it, of a choir singing outside by a willow tree, very kind of romantic notion, but all spaced out, facing away from each other, and singing this kind of very moving sort of hymn type material, and sort of just immediately engaging with the experience of being in a pandemic as a musician. And people from all over were sort of really touched by that, and music and the arts helps us to think and to process the world we live in, and especially when something as catastrophic as COVID has been, and as devastating as it has been for so many people across the planet.
Sarah, you would like to add?
Just so much of what Roddy's just said resonates with my own experience of the last 18 months. And we had an acting group who almost did the same thing. They put on a play that was scheduled to happen, just after the lockdowns, and they ended up learning all about risk assessment and how to do, and all these new things that they would never have thought of. And so they co-managed and presented in a car park, all completely COVID safe, So that a whole new skill set that they learned, and that adaptability and that ability to just be so resilient and get up and just literally brush yourself off and keep going is something that I think creative people have within them, and it's something that is brought out of them through their training. So I suppose that's the only thing I would add, that adaptability and resilience.
Fantastic. We had a question from one of our students, Shreyas. He's asking about what niche are you always good at, your niche, or is it like something you imagine, it does not materialize the same? So I am not very sure what he's asking. Go.
Can I try? I'm
Yep,
not
please.
Sure.
I'm also not sure what.
And he's obviously trying to figure things out himself as well, as we all are. It never changes, by the way. But maybe what he's trying to say is, do we need to identify the niche and match it to? The answer is no. You need to explore within you what your track, what your path, and stay in your lane, and be inspired, be by the things you see, what's happening in the world, but find your own, stay in your own lane, stay on your own path, and that will happen, and it will change. But that, I think that's what he means.
I think that is because the second one says about niche, are you always good at your niche, or is it like something you imagine at first? It does not look as you have imagined. So maybe you're absolutely right.
I think it's that idea, isn't it? That I think that certainly in my experience, when I was, a teenager and kind of starting on my academic path, I didn't really know much beyond what I'd kind of experienced to that point. So I knew that I liked making things, and I knew I liked painting and drawing, but but that's not my niche. That's not my niche now. That's not what gets me up in the morning now. I like doing it still as a hobby, but that's not what that part of my brain has become. And I think that stay in your lane and back yourself to know that you will find it, and that it will become obvious at some point. And I think it's very to the people that need to be a pianist or need to be a painter. They know that they understand that very clearly. And I think for people that actually want to apply that and work in a kind of application-based way, that also becomes clear. Once you understand what potential options are out there, and you don't really know that until you're kind of throwing yourself into those things. Reference points, I think.
Thank you, Rebecca. Professor Roddy, we'll go with Rahul's question. Would you like to answer, or should I read the question first?
No, I've got it. And I just want to follow up quickly, if I may, on what Rebecca and Sarah were saying just then, which is, I guess, this is very anecdotal because I'm speaking about my own personal experience, of course, but I've always been a bit of a magpie. Quite enjoyed, what's that going on over there? And I've not been very good at staying in my lane. I'm probably quite an erratic driver, and sort of veered around a little bit all over the place. And after a while, I've just discovered that what I really love is being around people who are interested in the same kinds of questions as me, and kind of, I guess, like facilitation and making things happen. And so I realized that I wasn't best suited at doing that creatively as a composer or performer. There were other people who could do those things much better and had better ideas and better technique, etc., etc. I was still interested in making all of that happen, and I had certain skills that I could bring to the table. So putting concerts on and getting audiences to the venues and all those kinds of things, and advocating, really. So in response to Rahul's question, you don't have to study music to be a musician. You don't have to study fine art to be a painter. The types of transferable skills that you get from doing an art subject are fantastic. You tick every single box of the sort of 7 core transferable skills, and I won't remember them all off the top of my head right now, but leadership, teamwork, working with information technology, digital media, or whatever it is, analytical abilities and abilities to work with abstract concepts and ideas, communications through a variety of different media. There are others, and I can't remember them all in a minute, but musicians tick every box. And we had the Royal Bank of Scotland, checkered history in the UK, but they got in touch with us a few years ago and said, we've just employed one of your music graduates, and we're absolutely so impressed with how they just get up and perform and speak. And so these are the sorts of things that you need in a team. A whole kind of well-rounded set of different people, and as anyone will know from being an employer or working in a team, you need people who can ask the right questions quickly, but they don't need to know all of the answers to begin with. Our students go off and do a whole wide range of things. I mean, there's so many things within music itself, but also beyond music. A number of our students have gone on and done a law conversion course and gone on to work in law. Their performance on the stage leads to their performance as a barrister or whatever. So they're so transferable, those sorts of things, Rahul.
Absolutely. You don't need to study fine art to be an artist. You don't need to be an artist if you study fine art. That's I think that's really
that's
critical to think.
Said.
Yeah, really.
Very, very well said. We have a few more questions. I am from commerce background and I have very less idea about music. So can he study music?
It's quite possible. So there are a whole set of different sorts of entry requirements for different sorts of courses. So if you want to go and study at the Royal Academy of Music in London, then they don't particularly care what your academic background is. You could have two E's at A-level if you're the best pianist in the country. So the way that they select their students is on audition. Most universities will have entry requirements at A-level or equivalent subjects. So in our case, it's AAB, but it really depends on the sorts of course that you're applying to. Within music, there's loads of different kinds of courses. So there could well be a course out there. But commercial background in commerce could mean a lot of different things. I wouldn't like to assume what that is, but it may be that you're sort of focused in wanting to do a degree on the music industry specifically. And there's some really good degrees around there focusing on the industry. So there's a wide range of different types of providers within the UK HE sector, and they all do their thing. And what their thing is really varied.
Sure. The student has also applied for a course, which is music business management. So sure, there are opportunities. Sarah, it's true for other arts-related programs as well, isn't it? They can apply with a different background.
Yes, absolutely. We get across the board, but quite often we get master's students because, of course, master's in the UK is just that 1 year, unless it's architecture.
Right, absolutely.
And we get students from really diverse backgrounds onto our master's programs. And going back to what was said earlier, those transferable skills, the master's is about really exploring and challenging their existing ideas, existing ways of doing things. And by bringing in people from those diverse backgrounds, it allows those conversations to happen, which is a really exciting space, actually. So students spend the first few weeks with students, who might be engineers, who might have been music or sound engineers, or wherever they've come from, or even accountants, and that's what makes it so exciting, is that they then take it in so many different directions and outputs.
Yeah. As a lecturer, it's always fascinating to have students come with different backgrounds. So when you're in the postgraduate seminar room and someone's joining you from a non-traditional route, so they might have a background in business or something, their whole perspective on the questions that you're talking about is completely different. And that's when the conversations in a seminar really take off. So,
So does it become difficult for the student if they come from different backgrounds because they don't have a background? Or...
depends on the course. Yeah.
Sure.
It's really hard to generalize. Yeah.
Yeah, got it. So Meenakshi has a question. She's saying, hi, I have done very well in fine arts during school, but during college, I kind of drifted away because I was busy, but I don't feel very lively without art. But I don't really want to be a painter. How do I go about exploring my options? Sarah, would you like to?
Yeah, you get in touch with universities, you attend open days, you do a bit of research online to see you know what universities have on offer. There are so many. I mean, it can seem a bit overwhelming, I suppose, when you go online because there are so many universities. But I think maybe narrow down what you'd like your experience to be. You know, I'm from a specialist university. We're quite small. Would you rather be in a more general university with lots of different subject areas? Is there a particular location you'd like to be in? So maybe think of the practicalities and then narrow it down a bit before you start finding the place that might suit you. You know, it's like buying a pair of shoes, I suppose. Sorry, fashion analogy, but you've got to find the one that fits, and try not to be influenced too much by things like, you know, we won gold in this, or you know, we have 100% this. Those things are important, of course they are, but they're not the only thing. You need to look at the thing as an overall.
I think we have time only to take one more question. Joyce is writing, post my undergrad in computer science, if I pursue music, can it lead me to AI/ML, as that is where I want to be via the music? Does this career path make sense, Dr. Rowdy?
Yeah, I mean, if you don't know, Joyce, the work already of the artist Holly Herndon from America, then I suggest you check it out. So she actually did a PhD in experimental music and composition and computing at Stanford in the US, but she now has a career as I guess you'd sort of call her she's sort of in the vein of Björk, you know, that has that kind of popularity, but also sort of, I guess, what you would call experimental streak. And she's done a lot of work with AI instruments with her collaborators. So she's certainly making a career out of it and doing some really interesting artistic work as part of her practice. My colleague at Manchester, actually, Ricardo Clement, is working a lot with AI at the moment. It's an interesting question, isn't it? If we can teach a machine to compose like a human, then what is a composer? And slightly frightening, but these exactly the kinds of ethical questions that artists have to engage with and explore through their practice, because it's really important that these ethical aspects of AI are pursued as rigorously as the technological possibilities, because otherwise we're going to be too far behind to be in charge. So that's where creativity and the arts and interdisciplinary working together is going to be absolutely crucial. So someone from a computer science background pursuing either a master's degree or a PhD in composition in AI, for example, would be a really smart move and a really valuable one, I'd say.
I think it's exactly the same for the visual arts space, just to throw that in. I think it's, you know, really exciting and challenging, and also rewarding in all sorts of ways area, I would say.
I really don't want to end this discussion. This is really an interesting discussion, and our students are really enjoying it. They have so many more questions, and I think we will get in touch with you, asking more, you know, sending these questions over to you for your feedback. Thank you so much for taking time early morning Sunday for all of you, all three of you. Thanks once again for being here and answering all the questions that our students have had today.
Absolute pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm so sorry we are short on time. We have to end this session.
Pleasure.
Yeah, thanks for putting it on. It's been brilliant. Thank you.
Yeah. Nice to meet you both.
You too. Yeah, really good to see you.
Okay, see you soon.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.